In this video, I'm going to be talking about how to make an offer on a house specifically for first responders and how they can use that to their advantage when buying a home. Stay tuned, it's Steve Dooley. Hey, it's Steve with First Responder Real Estate here, where I serve all my other fellow first responders with all things real estate related. So if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell and stay tuned, because you don't want to miss out on all the tactics and strategies we use for real estate coming to you on a regular basis. Well, at face value, it may seem pretty straightforward to placing an offer. Just come up with a good price point and throw the offer at the seller, right? Well, there may be a few more things to consider. So let's dive in and go into the steps involved in placing the perfect offer. So one of the most crucial things, before we even get into placing the offer is knowing your own financial situation. Are you paying cash for the house, or are you using some kind of loan or financing? Those things that play an important part. As far as loan types go, you got things like VA loans that require no down payment, FHA loans, conventional loans. All of those things factor into the kind of the offer you're going to place, and they all rank in an order of importance to the sellers. Obviously, to the sellers, cash is king, followed by a conventional loan, because with the conventional loan, the appraisals are not as strict. And then after that, you have the VA and the FHA loans. Sellers are just looking for their bottom line. So those are things to consider and things you need to know going into the process of putting in the offer. When you're using a loan for the purchase, one other really key thing to consider or have knowledge of going into it is seller concessions. And that means that depending on what you and your lender have talked about with your agent, do you need the seller to pay for closing costs, or are you able to cover that expense on your own? Seller concessions, are a big factor in making that offer more or less desirable. Again, when the seller is looking at the offer, seller concessions are usually, on a typical price point of, $250,000. They're usually around $5,000, and that's the closing costs incurred for the buyer's closing costs. That includes mostly the loan fees, but it also factors in things like HOA fees and taxes and insurance as well. All that stuff lumped together is called the closing costs, and if you're asking the seller to pay for them, then you just got to know that that's going to come off the bottom line of the seller's profits. So step number 2 in putting together our offer is property research. A great agent like myself is going to look at a few things. Number 1, we're going to look at how many days the property has been on the market. So if the property's been on the market only a few days, then the likelihood of the sellers taking a lower offer is probably less. While at the same time, if the property's been on the market like 3-4 months, then odds are in our favor of maybe putting in a lower offer and getting the seller to accept. Another thing we need to consider is the actual market itself. Now, are we in a buyer's market or a seller's market? And what that means briefly is, in the seller's market, there's low inventory, so a low number of houses relative to the number of buyers. In a buyer's market, it's the opposite. There's fewer buyers and more houses available for sale. That's important because if an example of a seller's market, you're going to have very few houses and you might have several buyers competing for the same house. So that's definitely going to be a factor in what kind of a price we're going to put in on our offer. Another thing we're going to take a quick look at as far as property research goes is we're going to do a search on the county website, which is public access, and we're going to find out how much the sellers owe on the property. So if the sellers owe quite a bit, then the likelihood of them taking a lower offer might be less, versus if they have a ton of equity, then that would make them more open potentially to accepting a lower offer. The next step that your agent will do, or you should do if you're doing it without an agent, is you should run the comps. And what I mean is take a look at all of the properties in the area, preferably in the same neighborhood if you can. Otherwise, in like a mile radius search, find out take a look at all the properties that have closed within the last 6 months. And the closer you can get those properties to the one that you're looking at, the better. So if you can match up like bedrooms, bathrooms, whether it has a pool or not, etc., then the closer you can get those comps, then the better off you're gonna be to determine kind of what the home is worth. A couple other factors to consider when looking at comps is the lot location. That's a very often overlooked thing. So for example, if the property that you're interested in purchasing is located in a nice big cul-de-sac, in a big lot, versus some of the comps were on a main street or on a busy street, then you can kind of adjust, a few $1,000s plus or minus for those lot locations. Same thing with pools and things like that. Those are things to consider when looking at comps compared to the property you're interested in. So the next step is going to be on your realtor to do. So what your realtor will do, if they're decent, what they'll do is they'll reach out to the listing agent prior to even placing the offer. Just let them know. We'll have a discussion, just let them know that we saw the property and that we're interested in placing an offer. I'm going to ask them a few questions to see if we can gather some intelligence. And the objective with this is, number one, the first and foremost, is if I can get the seller's motivation, that's going to play a huge part in determining how we can place offers and negotiate. So just a few of the questions to have your realtor ask the listing agent would be, number one is, have they had a lot of showings? And so that determines, if the people are interested in the property or not. That's going to play into days on market as well. So if the property's only been on the market, a couple days or maybe a week, and they don't have too many showings, then that's an indicator that, if you're first to the table on that offer, that you could go a little bit more aggressive or lower in price point. And that obviously ties into the next question, which is part of that, is do they have any offers currently on the table? In a high seller's market, it's very common to get multiple offers in, within a few days of the property going live on MLS. Versus in a buyer's market, it'll probably take longer, and you're less likely to run into that multiple offer situation. Now, in the event that you run into multiple offers, is definitely at a disadvantage for the buyer, because now there is going to be a bidding war. So in that case, I usually tell my clients, if they really love the house, to put in their highest and best offer, because we are going to be competing with other offers, sometimes several offers, so we just don't know. And then of course, like I mentioned earlier, seller motivation. I'm going to ask probing questions to the listing agent in hopes that they will, divulge some information about the sellers and, why they want to move, because that's going to determine a lot. If they're in a hurry, like on a timeline, and they need to get out within a certain amount of time, like say they're buying another house or they're relocating for a job, etc., then that puts us at an advantage, because they might be more likely to work with us on stuff because they are highly motivated to sell. Contrastly, on the other side of that, if people already have another home and they're not in any hurry to sell, then they're probably just going to wait for the highest and best offer that they can get. So that's just stuff to consider when we're looking at determining the price point. So just a quick recap so far, we've looked at 4 things. Your financial situation, we've done property research, we've run the comps on the property, and we've reached out to the listing agent to gather intelligence. Now, all those steps that we did and all that work were to determine the price point. So based on all that information, now we can come up with a price point that we're going to look at for placing the offer. So for an example, if we go and look at a house and it was really nice, we ran the comps, it looked like the price was in a good price point, that it looks like it'll appraise and it's in a good price range with the other comps around, and we really like the property. The days on market were long, say it's been over 30 days, and it's in a seller's market, then that's good. Then we can, and we don't need seller concessions, then we can probably come in, $5,000 or $10,000 under in hopes to get a counteroffer. That's just one scenario. But I just want to show you how all those factors kind of play into, determining that price point to begin with. Now, price point is not the only thing to consider. And in this last bit of video, I want to talk about the actual contract and several other miscellaneous factors that can really make or break an offer, especially if you're competing with others. So the first thing I want to talk about is this is all part of the actual writing the contract now, is the home warranty. You know, it's always recommended that buyers get a home warranty that covers, you know, unforeseen expenses like roof, plumbing, electrical, major things that happen within the first year. It usually costs between $400 and $600. Now, this is a negotiating piece, and this is part of our offer, because in the contract, at least in Arizona, you can ask the seller to pay for the warranty or the buyer can pay for the warranty. So obviously, taking all other things into consideration, if the buyer pays for the warranty, it makes the offer more appealing, versus asking seller to pay, then, you know, that kind of weakens the offer a little bit. Now, granted, it's only $500, so but all the other factors apply. You know, what's the market look like, how long has it been on the market, etc. So the next thing I want to talk about really quick is the close-up escrow date. This is another thing that your realtor can write into the offer to make it more enticing to the seller. The sooner the closing date, the better typically. And obviously, if you're using a loan, then you're going to be looking at a standard of 30 days. But if you're doing cash, if you can put in a 2-week or maybe a 3-week closing date, that's definitely to make your offer more appealing to most sellers. So the next thing we can put in the offer is the inspection period time. You know, standard inspection period is 10 days, but we can write in 12 or we can write in 5. You know, again, the shorter the inspection period, the more enticing to the seller. Longer inspection periods, you know, the sellers don't like that as much because it gives you more time to find stuff wrong with their house. Now, the title company is the next thing here in the offer. The title company usually gets to be chosen. It's written in the offer and the buyer gets to pick. Now, a lot of times sellers will have already started some title work and they'll put that in, you know, the MLS and let your agent know. So if you want, in a competitive market, if you want to make your offer more enticing, you can use the title company that's picked by the seller. Now, there are disadvantages to that because your agent usually works with a title company and an escrow officer that they're very familiar with. And in the event there is a dispute about earnest money, title gets to decide, you know, who gets the earnest money in some kind of a lapse in the contract, typically. So if you have the escrow officers on your side, then that's usually to your advantage. But if you're in a high competitive market, you may elect to pick the seller's title company just to make the offer look more appealing. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was earnest money. So standard earnest money amount deposited is 1% of the purchase price. You know, that's the standard. But again, if you're trying to make your offer look more appealing, then you can actually put more in earnest money. Just know that that money is at risk to a degree, because if somehow you are in breach of contract, then the earnest money would go to the seller. So there is a slight risk to that. But if your agent's good and does everything right with the contract, in the event you have to get out of the deal due to inspections or appraisal not meeting, etc., then you should get that money back. But the more you put in, the more appealing it is, and then that's that. Okay, so now you can see that, you know, there's a little bit more to putting in this purchase offer than just kind of slapping a number up there and going after it. Your agent should be helping you and doing a lot of this research and doing all the legwork as far as running comps, property research, and things like that to determine the right price point, looking at days on market. All those things play into that. And then when you're writing up the offer, you can talk about the different things, you know, as far as home warranty and title company, earnest money amount. And again, it's what's most comfortable to you. It depends on the market and how much competition you're facing. But all those things kind of play together, and so that's how you craft that perfect offer for your home purchase. So hopefully this video gave you some information about how to make a purchase offer, and if you like more information about the buying process and what to expect as you go through the contract, please click the link below in the description. I have a first responders home buying guide made especially for first responders that outlines the entire buying process from start to finish. That's very helpful and useful. And again, watch another video in this series, and thanks for watching. Talk to you soon.